change the colors in your mind. Kicks and stones will never change. I'll be so straight and blind. The more we learn, the less we lose. We can run to the streets, defeat the enemies, or we can drown the sea with freedom voices. If there was a
Live from the virtual historic grounds of Lime Rock Park, we say good afternoon, race fans, and welcome to the iRacing Esports Network's coverage of the Corvette C8.R Championship Series Championship Race. We're happy to have you tuned in on the iRacing Esports Network. We're alongside of myself, Evan Pasoko, happy to be joined by Justin Prince on the call this afternoon. And Justin, these drivers have been qualifying through time trials to get into this event. Now it's time for the main event. So they're all going to go out on track, and now it's time to put your money where your mouth is, per se, and get the job done as we get sent for a real fun afternoon of racing here at Lime Rock Park.
Yes, indeed. These drivers have specifically taken part in time attacks throughout the past few weeks to try and get themselves to here, to be able to compete for multiple prize opportunities. The thing is, though, it's about one thing, being quick when trying to put down a hot lap. It's another when you're trying to win a race. These drivers will need to keep their cars clean for 40 minutes today and show what they can do. And this is a strong mix of drivers in this field today, Evan, where you've got a mix of real-world drivers, road course veterans, as well as even some oval aces and a couple of RC drivers mixed in with one of the top cars of all of 2020 on the iRacing service.
One of my favorite things on the sim, right? That different mix of drivers that we get in these kind of races. And I think you mentioned a good point there. 40-minute race coming up for you this afternoon is not a long endurance event by any stretch of the imagination, but by everybody qualifying in basically on hot laps, you're going to have to search for a little consistency. They are going to be able to hot lap in just a few moments. Practice underway right now. It'll be followed up by a qualifying session. And then, as you mentioned, we'll go racing for 40 minutes. But let's talk a bit about those prizes, Justin, that you mentioned these drivers are fighting for. The driver at the top of the podium step can walk away with a real nice Corvette watch, but everybody else in the field also going to get some stuff as well.
Yes, indeed. Second and third place will get a custom design helmet, essentially a Corvette Racing decorated custom design on that said helmet. Also, each of the drivers will receive a coin, a Corvette Racing coin specifically for taking part in this event. There's a lot of pride for these drivers to get ready for this type of event. And there's a reason that since this car made its way to the iRacing service, it's become one of the most popular cars for all the drivers to use, with its quickness around the racetrack, all the way to its ability to handle the corners. And for some of them, especially some of the most dedicated drivers who are taking part today from all of the United States, this is going to be one where they get rewarded for that effort.
It is. It's one of the newest cars as well to the iRacing service, so everybody's really a big fan of it. And I want to welcome a special guest into our pre-race coverage. I want to welcome in Todd Christensen, who's the Strategic Marketing and Operations Manager for Chevrolet Motorsports. Todd, thanks for coming on.
Hey, great to be here.
We were just talking about how this is one of the newer cars to the service, but it's one of many Chevrolet-powered cars in iRacing. Just tell us a little bit about the partnership between iRacing and Chevrolet, and that opportunity that it gives to consumers and iRacing members to drive these cars in a virtual world.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And iRacing is such an amazing platform. Motorsports these days isn't that accessible to everybody, so you guys do an amazing job to allow so many drivers and aspiring racers to get out there and compete in a virtual world. So we're happy to be a part of it. It gets our products exposure to upcoming racers. And frankly, it's used by a lot of our race drivers as well. I can speak for sure that many of our Corvette Racing Pro drivers use this in the off season and even during the season to keep their skills sharp and even learn some of the new tracks that they might be seeing in the upcoming season.
Now, this car just came onto the service as of a couple of months ago, and maybe for those who may not be familiar, the cars, the tracks, and everything here on the iRacing service are laser scanned to millimeter accuracy. So you're not going to find a virtual replica of the cars or tracks better anywhere else. So tell us about what that process was like, getting the C8.R scanned into iRacing.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing process, and as you can imagine from our side, the race team's always a little apprehensive to give away all the secrets, but I think we worked really closely with iRacing to, in fact, fast track this. They didn't start until, whatever it was, probably like May. And both teams, iRacing and the Corvette race team, worked really closely to get all the data, not only scanning the exterior surfaces, but all the performance data to make sure that the car acts and behaves and responds the way the real car does.
And we have an opportunity in this race, right, where we have a mix of various different drivers, some real life pros, some drivers in the sim who are good on the road courses, drivers on the sim who maybe do a little bit of stuff outside of this kind of, sports car racing. So you talk about the opportunity to give the general public access to these cars. I'd count myself as that, right? Somebody who's got no business behind a real car, but in the sim, I can go out and have some fun. I personally think it's really cool to see those two come together.
Yeah, it really is. Again, not everybody can set to get into a race car on the weekend. And there's so many people that are out there aspiring to race, and we want it, right? We want people to interact with our cars. And this is the first step many times for some people to get started in either car enthusiasm or racing. I mean, I look at one of our NASCAR drivers, William Byron, right? He's been an iRacer for years, and I think that's one of the key steps to his success. And now he's in the Cup Series. So what a great story that is.
And I know that it's been a good year for Chevy across the board in the sim as well. I mean, you mentioned William Byron. It was the Chevrolet-powered team that won the eNASCAR championship this year. Let's talk a little bit more about this Corvette, though. Obviously, the 8th generation Corvette going to that mid-engine layout. It's had a lot of success on the track in real life. What's the feedback been?
Yeah, it's been great, both with the production car and on the track. I mean, who would have thought our first year out, brand new car, first time with a mid-engine Corvette ever, and the first time the race car is obviously mid-engine, to come out and, win 6 or 7 times this season, win the manufacturer's championship. Antonio Garcia, Jordan Taylor won the driver's championship. We're just so pleased that, the team were able to put this together so quickly. And the production car, we continue to be almost sold out. There's still a lot of people waiting to get their hands on the production car. It's won multiple awards itself, and we just couldn't be happier with the C8 and the C8R.
I'll let them know that if they're waiting on theirs, hop over into the sim and you can take it for a couple of laps ahead of time. We'll let you get out of here, Todd, because we're excited to get this race underway. But I just want to say one more time, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on another successful year for the entire team at Team Chevy, not just, as we mentioned, in the sports car racing, but kind of all across the motorsports. So thanks for chatting, and I hope you enjoy the race.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good luck to all the competitors, and have a great race.
Bring Justin Prince now back into the conversation, but one more big thanks to Todd Christensen for joining us, the strategic marketing and operations manager for Chevrolet Motorsports. And, we talked about the format for this race, Justin. Let's get a little bit more into that as we get closer to race time, right? About 4 minutes left at our practice session. We'll go to a 10-minute open queue, right? So you're going to have many opportunities to get that hot lap down. So they qualified into this event based on hot laps. You can use hot laps to get yourself a good starting position on the grid before we go racing for a 40-minute timed event at the Grand Prix layout of this Lime Rock Park. Lime Rock Park's been on the iRacing service forever. It's one of the tracks that a lot of people are really familiar with, but this is a relatively new scan. So new scan of a car, relatively new track. It's going to be real fun.
And there's a reason it's actually one of the tracks where many different competitors have a lot of fun on. It's a smaller road course, 1.5 miles, yes, 7. But the main thing is, you mentioned the Grand Prix layout, is the chicane that's going to be around Big Bend is going to affect things, or rather uphill for today's competitors. For some, they may have more of the experience with the classic layout, where they just go over the hillside and quickly go to the right-hander. They have to deal with the chicane that's going to slow down these competitors a little bit and create a little bit of a potential bottleneck zone where you need to be able to hit it rhythm-wise to be able to carry momentum to West Bend. This type of race today is going to be one where competitors, I think, are going to enjoy themselves, but track position could be very vital, and the lap times are going to be very quick. For comparison's sake, right now, the drivers running as quick as 48 seconds around this racetrack.
Well, you mentioned the uphill. I mean, that's a tricky enough corner as is, especially when you come up and over the crest of the hill and you try to keep it on track. There's not a lot of, forgiving corners either. So we talk about a relatively short and fast lap. You go a little bit too deep, especially in exit at turn number 9, where they're coming down the hill back to the San Posey Straight. You get a little bit too far off, get the tires off it in the grass. You could be out with the gnome behind the guardrail, right? So it's really easy to make mistakes. And, we mentioned that this is a very popular track in the sim, and it's been around for some time. So I think most iRacing members have driven laps at Lime Rock Park. I think most race fans know quite a bit about this historic facility. It's one of the oldest continuing operating road racing venues in the country, behind some other staples like Road America, Willow Springs. But I think that the track wouldn't be so popular if it wasn't so fun, right? So I think this is going to make for a really exciting race. We talked about the prizes that are on the line for this one. Well, they're all fighting for a Corvette C8.R watch, and you talked about the helmets for second and third. So the emphasis is definitely to be on the podium, but I think everybody going to get that memento and that token of that Corvette coin just for getting to this event, Justin. I know that there's not, tons of prize money, and it's not a season-long thing to get into this. But listen, these drivers got here. That was step one, right? I think they were happy with that when they qualified in, but they want to win this thing. So I'm expecting a really hard, intense battle. Don't think these guys are going to take it easy on each other at all.
I think it's going to be a hard, intense race too. And here's the thing. We have various different skill levels competing here, where there's various different levels of road course racing experience in the iRacing service in and of itself. Some of them just started this year even. Some of them have been from the very beginning, just about from 2008. You're going to see a lot of quick laps, to say the very least. I think it's going to be an intense race, to say the very least, with the drivers here, because for a lot of them, know for a fact, Devin, they do not want to give up without a fight in this type of race car today, in this type of environment. The question is, which driver is going to take away the checker flag?
For many of them, first big opportunity for a big stage like this, and happy to be part of this event with our friends at GM and Corvette for putting this on. So the practice session has drawn to a close. We are qualifying from Lime Rock Park. So a 10-minute open qualifying session, as it's the land rush to get out of the pits, and some drivers try to find some clean track position to get this Q session underway, as these drivers try to qualify themselves the best out of the 26 competitors in the field.
And many of these drivers trying to get a little bit of draft to start things off down the straightaway. For some competitors, they tested the speed compared to some of the cars on the service in this respective class. It's one of the quickest, in fact, the quickest in a straight line on the iRacing service. Very quick in the corners as well, and under braking. So it's a car that flows well around this type of racetrack and flows to the competitors who can find that balance of speed down the Sam Posey straight to hitting the brakes, going down all the way to second gear for the right-handers and the left-handers. It's the run through the Big Bend, which will be one of the main passing zones for today. Now, this is where, as a driver, you'll have a lot of rhythm come into play, where you need to go quick to the left-handers and the right-hander to the no-name straight. Couple of competitors, though, from about here, if you mess up this little flick through the chicane, can cause problems such as that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough enough corner as is. He was too deep into the uphill. That's a quick right-hander for 5, a left-hander for 6. Then you go for the left-hander, turn 8, the west bend. You come shooting down the straightaway underneath the bridge, and then the right-hander through the downhill. Turn number 9 is where I talked about not wanting to exceed those track limits. You can see right off at the end of the racetrack, there's no runoff, right? It's grass and an Armco, and that is a lap around the infamous Lime Rock Park. We are running on board with Caden Bin, 48.892. Last lap that he put down, that is good enough right now for third best in the qualifying session. And we talk about drivers trying to find a little bit of a pocket to kind of get a good lap in here as we get a full look at our live Q results. It looks like Tucker Minter right now, top of the board with a lot of time to go. And 10-minute Q session, Justin, not short, not long by any stretch of the imagination, but around here, if you're efficient about it, you can get a lot of good looks at laps in.
Yeah, you can get realistically maybe 10 to 12 laps, depending on how many you want to turn around. And it also gives you the chance, say, if you make a mistake, to be able to pull off to the pit lane, try a new set of tires, see if you can pull on some extra pace from there. You can see, though, at the same time, you need to, as you mentioned with the pockets, make sure you don't get checked up by cars going to the pit lane or get held up in the chicanes, because there can be a bit of an effect from the cars in front in these tight sections. While there is the benefit for the straights, it can be a nuisance where some drivers, such as like right here with the 14 machine, might prefer to have this open space for sectors 1 and 2 especially.
And on board again now with Eddie Kerner as he comes through the left-hander in 3, the right-hander for 4, and then up to the uphill with the right-left combo. And it looks like that one of the drivers off track there, so that seems to be a troublesome spot. You also mentioned at 3 and 4, really kind of a momentum-based and rhythm-based part of the racetrack. I saw at least 2 cars get off track there when they were just getting out. I know Carter Kundager just went off track a little bit further behind Kerner as he looks to improve on a 50.2 to pick up some pace. Turner's last lap, 55.0. So, still working on a little bit extra as he tries to get himself up into a good Q position. Just because you don't Q well doesn't mean you can't win this championship, but make your life a whole lot easier. And for all the varying skill levels, Justin, basically top of the Q board to the bottom, you can see those intervals. It's not much more than a half a second and change, right? So that is a pretty good split through the field as we got more cars coming out and on track.
Even then, for the top 10, it's about 0.3 of a second or so between first to 10th. Some of these competitors, though, are not having a good time so far in finding that open space we talked about, and some of them having that massive challenge. Here's the thing, though. You also have to be prepared for potential weather conditions. We've talked about it in the past where if the track is hot, you're going to not have a lot of grip. It's a very hot racetrack today, 107 degrees Fahrenheit, so the grip levels might not be as big time there compared to what they may be expecting compared to testing. And for some, you're seeing that exactly come into play. But for others, though, like Wyatt Gooden, one of the big-time veterans of the iRacing service, nice and comfortable, currently at the top of the board.
That Jack Sanchez machine spun out in front of him, so you saw him avoid that. And by the way, the 18.799 for Gooden is not an actual lap time. He reset the car, went out and tried another hot lap. So if he was doing 18-second lap times, I don't think anybody would be touching him. He's coming out of turn number 9 right now, but a little bit too much grass. Going to kind of handicap him a little bit as he tries to get down the straightaway. You can see he keeps it up on the revs, high in 5th gear down to turn number 1. And that last lap time for him, pretty good one, is again, they're all shooting for a 48.548. That is your current provisional pole, 549, with Wyatt Gooden at the top of the board. That is the fastest lap we've seen all afternoon because Braden Werner was the best in practice earlier today with a 48.606. So that means that your top 3 times in Q so far, best in anything that we saw in the practice session, Justin. So maybe those guys were saving a little bit for when it mattered the most.
Absolutely. Making sure as well that you don't kind of show your hand is part of the argument, right? Where some may be a bit more careful in practice just to feel things out, see how the track may fare. For others, they may go full out and take that as the opportunity to show what they can do and hope to carry said momentum into qualifying. Philip Campbell currently at the bottom of the board trying to figure things out and get into a rhythm here, just seeming like he's struggling with the curbing a little bit and the proper arc compared to the car in front and Carter Cundiner.
These two working together as they come off of turn number 9 and across the start-finish straight, still lapping again in that 50-second range, which means, we look at a 40-minute race, Justin. For this one, you're going to get somewhere in the ballpark, 50 to 60 laps, probably no pit stops anticipated for this 40-minute sprint event, I should say. Let's run on board with Christopher Beets. Let's take a lap around Lime Rock Park. That's what a 48.951 second lap time looks around Lime Rock. Beets not improving on a best lap at a 6.57, currently 5th in the qualifying session as we're down to now inside of 2 minutes left on the clock, so only a handful of opportunities as somebody forgot that we're not going the long way around turn 5. We're seeing a lot of drivers push it, Justin. I think a lot of them got a lap in that they're going to be happy with and they think is acceptable. And now at this point in the qualifying session, I think they're trying to push to see if they can find anything extra, and I think that's led to a handful of those offs that we've seen.
And even then, the track is continuing to get hotter, mind you, and as the rubber continues to build up. For some, it can be a bit more and more trickier as this qualifying session continues to be able to put on in good lap times. The main thing is, though, keep in mind, instant time is just past 3:44 right now. There's a chance it can cool down, especially as this race time progresses. But this is going to be where it's one of the hotter temperatures of the entire race. For these competitors, it's about being able to adapt to it and being able to wheel their cars around here without making major mistakes, because here's the thing. Eventually, all these drivers are going to have to rush into Big Bend all against one another, and the best drivers who make it to the corner are going to be the ones who can keep their cars the cleanest and be able to get themselves in decent track position to start.
You talk about those temps, it's quote-unquote only 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and virtual Lakeville, Connecticut, but those track temps you talk about going up are up to 107 degrees right now Fahrenheit, and you can see actually looks like a little bit of cloud cover over this portion of the racetrack as we follow along with a group of cars, whereas I'm looking at some of the other drivers, other side of the track, and some sun, right? So that dynamic weather going to play a factor in this race. Not going to swing the temps by such an extreme here or there, but just like in real life racing, Justin, you get in the clouds for a little bit, it'll cool things down, you get out in the sun, vice versa. So that's why you'll see those changing conditions all race long.
That's where adaptability comes into play. Absolutely. This car can really handle said adaptability well, and those clouds could be a factor, but checker flag waving drivers would have the chance, Evan, to complete whatever qualifying laps there are, but for the most part, looking fairly stable on the board.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of changing since those opening 2 to 3 minutes, and even though the checkered flag is out, they have about a minute to finish their lap, which means that if you started your lap, you can finish your lap with the time being less than that to get around this 1.5 mile Grand Prix version of Lime Rock Club. Top cars pulling off now. Gooden even still trying to improve, Justin, and a new fastest lap as the buzzer sounds. Wyatt Gooden maintaining that position at the top of the board. So a late change, just as we said, and maybe not. That one came down at the closing seconds. We'll take a look in a moment.
Yes, and there's going to be a lot of experience throughout this field. A lot of the drivers, especially towards the front, you may not expect them to see in some of the experiences across the service and towards the front. But for some of them, they're well revered for their experience in multiple different types of cars. This is going to be a fun race, to say the very least.
Let's take a look at your Corvette C8.R Championship Series starting grid, and Wyatt Gooden will start from pole with a 48.496, just edging Tucker Minter, who will start on the outside in second. You also have Tyler Hervius, who starts at the inside of row 2, third, alongside Eddie Kerner rolling from fourth. Christopher Beats starts in fifth. Braden Werner is in sixth.
Bullet for start in row 4. Alongside with Urban out away. Tom Ebermeyer is one of the drivers from the ECO Cup of Nations starting in row 5. Keep an eye as well on the outside of row 6.
The likes of Ryan Hill, Chris Mann alongside Mike Rasmussen and Hunter Manley through row 8. Carter Hundinger and Dane Verano. Michael Diaz, Jonathan Kearns, your top 20.
Nicholas Chart was 49.133, looking to bump that up one of the last times in qualifying. The last driver overall in the session was Philip Campbell of 49.363, rounding out the 13 rows of cars today, Evan.
And a look top to bottom at your iRacing Sports Network qualifying results here from virtual Lime Rock Park, and cars are on the grid. They'll take one lap around before the iRacing official pace truck will dive down and out of the way, and we will start the clock for 40 minutes to crown a champion and hand out some really cool prizes from Chevrolet. So we saw a lot of these drivers, Justin. I think the same group of about 5 or 6, I think, have a realistic shot at this. We saw those cars fast in practice, and we saw those cars fast in qualifying. But, guys like Werner, fastest in practice, not good enough, for P6, I should say, on the grid. You've got some other drivers. I don't think that it's going to be a cakewalk. I think that there's going to be a handful of drivers that are going to challenge, but as we take a minute to pace around the field here, I want to get your thoughts on the speed that we've seen out of a couple of these drivers, and maybe 1 or 2 guys that we think has a real good opportunity to get the checkered here.
I think Wyatt Gooden is definitely one of the favorites to keep an eye on. We talked about him and his veteran experience around the iRacing service. He was the first driver, mind you, to be able to get manufacturer support in 2009 to race in the real world. Eventually raced in in F2000 a few years back. Also, I think you have to keep an eye on Tucker Minter outside front row. Worked with NASCAR competitors for NASCAR Happy Hour a couple months ago. Also keep an eye on Eddie Kerner as well as a couple others, including Braden Warner, who's been quick and one of the top contenders this year in various iRacing special events. And don't forget about some of the drivers in the mid-pack who may be able to charge up to the front, like Carter Kundiner, who is well known and well revered in this car.
40 minutes as we have a real nice Chevrolet C8.R watch to the champion. Couple of helmets for the rest of the drivers on the podium, and hopefully an entertaining show for all of you tuning in with us here on the iRacing Esports Network. Also, don't expect any full course caution flag period. Sector yellows only for this event. So keeping it clean, even though 40 minutes is not that long of a race, especially by these standards. You know, most drivers in the real world are used to driving these, and in the sim for that matter, in things like the 24 Hours of Daytona, Le Mans, and many other similar events. You do still need to be disciplined. We talk about how thin this track is. You can see it off of the back of the pace truck. Not sure you could fit two pace trucks side by side. We can squeeze the Corvette C8Rs in there alongside each other. So they'll come down the downhill section through the right-hander, and the pace truck at a dive with the safety of pit road right there. The field in the hands of Wyatt Gooden. Let's go racing at Lime Rock. Couple of big dives down into turn one. Some cars off track towards the rear. I know Scott Kimbrough got involved in an incident, but for the most part up front, we are good. Looking at Braden Werner, the number 4, best in practice, looking to pick up some time, and he picked up off of the start of this race. He goes to P4 after being slated to start from 6th.
Good start for the Maryland-based driver, absolutely. Up 1 position, +2 as well for Aoi, be able to move his way up to 6. +5, though, for the number 14 machine in Bin. Youngster able to cut his way up to P7 already. It is among the lead train.
Yeah, some drivers back of the pack making moves, the likes of Sean Keiko and others. But up front, obviously, watching the battle for the race lead in this one. That's race leader Wyatt Gooden, who was able to maintain no changes off the start for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So Gooden, Minter, Hervias, and Kerner all maintain positions, whereas mid-pack, it is a great scrap. It's all behind Werner. As you can see, Beats, I think, in the 15 machine just now being overtaken. That was John Bodefier to the inside and completing that move.
Yep, P2, in fact, on the iRacing servers in some of the official series, but right behind all these cars, P5 starting a single file out a little bit. And this is where, as drivers in the road course races, you get into a rhythm. And with this car, it's fairly comfortable to do. You can flow around this racetrack, handle a lot of the bumps. As long as you don't make a major mistake under braking, you can make the quick flick of the wrist from right to left, back to right, making your way easily through uphill. We've seen in qualifying and in practice, it's major troubles for drivers on the turtles there.
You see a couple of drivers getting real close to that grass section, as well as 1, 2 are trying to pull away just a little bit with Minter running into number 2 position. So those cars trying to edge a little bit of a gap over that 37 machine running in 3rd. It does look like, though, Eddie Kerner 4th, that 3rd of the yellow painted Corvettes in line 4th on the racetrack. I think that might be the difference, right? I think we may see a top 3 eventually over 40 laps, maybe a top 2 breakaway. Again, there's no way to kind of reverse engineer your strategy to the end of this race. These cars are packed with enough fuel to go to the end, so it's all about speed and consistency. Left-hand side, a battle for the race lead. Right-hand side, battle for 9th. Christopher Beets leads that group. He's being chased by Dallas Roy.
And this is how races can play out in some cases, right? You get these groupings of cars in terms of similar pace, in terms of similar rhythm. And for some, it can take a few laps or so to be able to time up a pass. You have to be patient. You have to be precise in your movements. You can't just shove it up the inside and hope it sticks. You have to wait for your right moments. We talked about the best passing zones. The Samposi straight down that front stretch is going to be your best opportunity. But as well, it's important that you make your run through the final corners today, especially in your groupings like this from West Bend to downhill, so you can set it up properly to make those passes today in this drafting pack.
We talked about all the drivers going forwards. That's because, a huge slide. That's a way off and into the tire barrier for the 21 of Dallas Froy. Completely missed that corner. And his race going to end just like that. He'll take a tow to the pit lane, maybe get an opportunity to fix that car and bring it on track, but that'll take him out of a top 10 position. And I was just about to mention some of the other drivers, Justin, that had issues early. Mike Rasmus was spun around in turn 1, lap 1. The 97 of Philip Campbell had made some contact with the likes of the 18 and others. So there's some drivers who we thought would have some speed mid-pack that have dropped back. Let's go on board with Froy.
See, right here, hit the grass and that knocked him loose, and that's one of the main things is you clip the grass alongside your arc on the entry, it can kick you sideways, and you have basically half a second to respond. For some, it's not enough time to be able to get the grip back in the car, try and keep it off the fence. That time just slid off the racetrack, the short track ace, in a bit of trouble early.
I've seen it a couple of times, right? How thin the track is, how unforgiving it is. I think most tracks around the country would give you a little bit of a runoff there, pave it, and just penalize you, right? If you go a little bit too deep, obviously you're trying to maximize your arc into that very tricky west bend for turn number 8 where he had the issues and just got a little bit too far out to the left-hand side. And, he was going way too fast to be able to really recover that car, and you saw him go right into the tire barriers, basically ending his night, taking him out of a top 10 position. Here's a real good trio for 16th place on track. It's about 12 seconds off of the race leaders. It is Ismael Basso in the position right now. You've got the likes of Shane Keiko and Carter Kundinger behind, as looks like actually a bit of a gap pulled by the 23. So with those second two going to be the ones fighting. Let's go on board with Kundinger.
You can see, though, he's had a bit of contact here, Evan. That's going to slow him down the straightaways with that aero damage. Not too much of a factor for the corners, but for this battle for 16th, this is going to be a struggle for him because that takes away the ability to try and slipstream back up.
Kundinger's damage, by the way, came lap 1 when he turned Mike Rasmus around and a heavy break and run down to turn number 1. That was a bit of the damage, and then the second bit of the damage came in turn number 5, where everybody got checked up, and he got into Dane Verano. Verano had checked up because Chris Mann was spun around, and that's the chaos, right? You get the battle scars to show that fight to get through the opening lap of this race. Currently working lap number 8, but again, watch the clock, top left of your screen, about 33 minutes and change still to go, and this is no longer just a three-way battle as one car way off and in the grass behind this. That was Nicholas Carras, who was just way out of control, kept it out of the barrier. He'll be okay, and now a spin and turn around in that battle is Ismael Basso. He's not the only one. Shane Keiko, I should say, also off track. That was a busy lap, and Ismael just saying just now over the radio, car was just pushing so much.
And that's one of the main things with Lime Rock Park is in some cases, you'll have those types of moments where you have differences in braking zones. Some, based on confidence, will be able to send it in deeper. Some back it up early and try and be more on the cautious side and arc it on in through Big Bend. That, in turn, was where those differences of braking marks came to play. You see it right here. You see right here the early brake. This checks up the whole line, trying to lock it up.
And I think it almost looked like the 5 was trying to go for a cross on the 23. The 23 almost braked early, got off of the brake, Justin, then back onto it, and he actually overshot the corner. The 5 got into him and checked him up, but it was just an accordion effect where Kearns got into the back of, I believe, the middle car there was Kundinger. Kundinger got up and into the 5, and so you get a 4-car incident down in turn number 1. I know we talk about the challenging parts of turn 5 and whatnot, but I mean, it is a long, wide straightaway with a very, flat and sweeping right-hander for turns 1 and 2, the Big Bend. Very, very easy to miss this corner, and if you're not on the inside of the racetrack, it almost feels like the track falls off on the outside of it. Very easy to end off it in the grass, and we've seen how unsuccessful some drivers have been tonight of recovering once they get off it in the grass. The cars like to slide. No grip out there. And again, with those very unforgiving runoff spaces, it's a good way to have some issues. All those cars involved in the incident, minor damage. We'll keep on going, though, as we take a look back to the race lead, still occupied by Wyatt Gooden. The difference back to Tucker Minter P2 now, 0.6 of a second, and hanging tough in third, the number 37.
Yeah, they're keeping Gooden in check. If it's trading times back and forth, Minter, one lap, he can be quick. The next lap, he's been losing the time back to Gooden as the flow has gone on. Taking a look as well at the battles for P8 and P16, you can see the similar type of rhythm coming into play. The thing is, with this battle for P8, it's gone back and forth a little bit the past few laps. The car in front of the 24 had made the pass a few laps ago and is now losing the time back already for the rest of this grouping.
Yeah, and that battle for position number 8 all the way up the road would be the number 19 machine of Ertman Aloe, and then you've also got Christopher Beets and Tom Abramidis behind in 10th, and then the battle for 16th position right now is led by Jonathan Kearns. Of course, Mann trying to get into the mix, but it looks like Kearns has been able to separate himself just a little bit. So if you're a fan of Corvette racing, I could look at this for hours. All the battles, all across track, as we are 1/4 distance, 10 minutes down, 30 minutes to go. 12 laps have been completed in this race. We pick up the fight for P8.
And you can tell these drivers are dialed on in, and that's one of the main things, right? For this type of event and with this type of experience with the car, you want to get as many laps in, because there's a reason there's the saying of the more seat time you can get, the better. There's a reason that it was talked about in the pre-race that many of the rear-world drivers for this car work a lot with this respective car in the simulator. There's been some investing in sim racing even in the past couple months or so, in investing in various sim racing operations. In our words, future is bright, especially with this car leading a lot of the charge on the roadside.
Very young car, right? We talked about it debuting this year in the 2020 24 Hours of Daytona, but even newer to the iRacing service when we had Todd Christensen on the pre-race. If you missed that, strategic marketing and operations manager for Chevrolet Motorsports, I'd encourage you at least post-race to go back and listen to that, talking about the process to get this car into the sim. They started in about May. It came just a couple of months ago, so it's still relatively new. And you talk about a good future, Justin. It's had a good start, right? I mean, already a team championship, the manufacturer championship in GTLM, and building on a successful history of the Corvette. This is the 4th Corvette built by Pratt & Miller since that partnership with GM started in 1999, and over the years it's accounted for 8 24 hours of Le Mans wins, 3 24 hours of Daytona, and 11 in the 12 hours of Sebring. So I think those accolades go to show you why a 40-minute sim race is a sprint, but obviously a successful start to the career for this car, and building on a lot of successful history for Chevrolet Motorsports.
And he hit upon Pratt & Miller. When I was doing a podcast a few months ago, they reached out when this car was announced, and there was a lot of excitement from the organization for this race car, for the design of it, for getting it onto the sim, because normally it can take a few years for cars to make their way through. This is, though, the chance for many of the drivers to get a grasp of it right from the get-go. And we're seeing already, many of them have come into full grips with how this car drives, with the speed, with being able to handle it for the corners, with its intricacies, to be able to find out in various different series what works, what may not work. And in turn, you're seeing the best drivers already with that big gap towards the top of the board.
Take a replay look at the 5. This is going to be coming off of the downhill, all on his own. And let's see, a little bit too far left. No good at this part of the racetrack. And then right there you can see, same thing to what we saw in 8 a little bit earlier. And he side swipes the tires, Justin. That last moment when he's trying to get all all the way to the left in 9 to maximize that corner. Just touched it as he started to turn the car and it loosened it up. He ended up into the wall. So things slowing down for Shane Kaiko, who's back down to the number 24 spot. And I just wanted to mention, just to finish that point that we're talking about, getting this car on the service. And it's something that Todd had mentioned when we talked to him as we pick up the battle for 4th. Is that race teams and drivers are notoriously kind of close to the chest, right? With data, as we watch this battle between Kerner and Werner, but he mentioned how closely Chevy worked, because it's one thing, Justin, to laser scan the car and to have a really good looking replica of a C8.R right in the sim. It can look great, but if it doesn't drive like the Corvette does on the track in real life, then what's the point? So there's a lot of cars in the world, a lot of cars even on the sim, right, where it has taken a long time to get them, right, to convince somebody, hey, give us all your data, right, because that's not a thing that race teams have conventionally done. Awesome that Chevrolet worked so close with iRacing to make that as smooth as possible, and that's a reason why this car got onto the sim so quickly, as I think Werner's got a real case here up on the back of the 3 machine. If he can get the job done, he is hounding him right now.
Yeah, Carter's been falling off on pace by a tenth to a half a tenth over the past 5 laps, so it's just struggling a little bit as the tires get heated up and some of the grip levels are dropping. Track temp is still fairly hot, mind you. It is a little bit cooler, but the tough part is Werner just can't get the flow completely correct to get, I think, a realistic shot to dive it up the inside here on the right side of the racetrack. It's going to take a few laps of patience before he makes that correct move to the right side of the racetrack. Correct.
Yeah, he's been within a second of him for basically this entire race now, but hasn't been able to complete the pass. And if he feels like he's being held up just a little bit, again, just because you're the faster car doesn't mean you're going to be able to get around him, because you're going to have to be able to make up the ground and then position yourself to good run off of some corner or into a braking zone to actually complete that pass. If he feels like he's being held up, this could become a 3-car battle soon, as Werner's all over the curbs looking for something extra to get the job done, because Caden Bin not that far off. We see him in the back of a couple of the shots there from P6. He's trying to join the party as well. Close it in though on halfway home in this Corvette C8.R Championship Series finale from Lime Rock, and let's take it all in as we go iRacing full throttle. And now halfway home from Lakeville, and a couple of good battles at the front of the field emerged. Well, we took a look there with iRacing to full throttle. He had a lot of good looks from the front of the field. I think riding on board, Justin, my favorite part, even though it's virtual, I understand, to hear the roar of that 500 horsepower, 5.5 liter engine is just so good, even in a virtual sense. And great battling going on throughout the field, but we saw the battle for the race lead closed in and the battle that you look at right now for fourth on back. So this race starting to come into its own. The top three cars within a second and change, fourth through sixth within about 1 second of each other. A lot of good action going on right now.
Minter and Gooden have been dead on with one another. And when it comes to the sound, it's important to get that right. Not just for the realism, but for some drivers, they may depend on those exact sounds to be able to time up when to shift to the gears, when they can go back on the gas, if they're locking the brakes, the tire squeal that can come into play. All that can factor in. When it comes to this battle, though, the main thing is, though, I've noticed, Minter in Sector 2, once he gets within about a car length or so of Gooden, just seems to struggle a bit with some of the dirty air that may factor in to just be able to file line for line. They do have lap traffic ahead, though, that may come into play.
Yeah, that is going to be a factor. We saw a close call, I think, with Jack Sanchez at one point where he was off track and slow and won. The race leaders came on by, and the battle for the race lead, the closest it's been in some time, at about 0.3 of a second. If you're enjoying the action on track and you want to get into the sim, now's the best opportunity to do so with iRacing's Black Friday sale. It's the biggest iRacing sale of the year, and it's 50% off new iRacing memberships. But even if you've had a membership and it's expired or you need to renew, to early renew so that your subscription doesn't expire, now's the time to do it. You can get discounts on early renewals, discounts on account reactivations, and again, 50% off new iRacing memberships. Just go to iRacing.com/Black Friday sale for more information and to start your iRacing career today, because with iRacing, every day is race day. And watching a thrilling battle for the race lead, Minter has closed the gap to Wyatt Gooden. He is on the bumper. Car length of a difference with traffic up the road. How does he execute?
Well, the thing is with the traffic, usually they will go off the racing line and let the competitors go. The main thing is, though, just timing it up right, because if you reach it in a non-passing zone, the respective traffic, I should say, it can check you all up. And in some cases can open up a passing opportunity for the car coming up. And now, because of that, this may open up a chance for Minter to send it up the inside here.
The difference is a car length. Now half a car length. Looking to the inside. Oh, he throws a block and Gooden spins off track. Tucker Minter, new leader. Now a spin in front of the race leaders. Around is Nicholas Charest. He avoids the number one. And it is Wyatt Gooden out in front. My, oh my. We knew the look was coming to the inside. Justin Minter went to put a block on him. And it did not work out as Minter gets through. Gooden went off track. And the number 10 machine of Tucker Minter, new race leader, working past halfway.
And I can kind of see that coming with the traffic. As soon as Gooden got within about a second or so of the lap cars, that's where he started to struggle, like Minter's been struggling within a couple car lengths. And he had to take that chance of it. That's the thing, because that was his best opportunity he's had the entire race to take this lead. The thing is, Gooden knew it. It was just a little bit too late, and that wiggle you seen right there was enough to just shuffle Gooden out once he got hit in the back end.
I think it was a bold move for Minter to try to come from that far behind into one, but Minter, if we saw on those onboards, he had been really good at attacking the corners, right, without giving too much up on exit. He was able to drive it in close some and then not really allow Gooden to pull back on him. So we knew Minter was going to be good. We talked about those dives down into one, and I think that Gooden knew as well, Justin. Listen, with 16 minutes left in this race, if he felt like he could hold off Minter for 16 more minutes, I don't think he throws the block, right? I think at that point, he had kind of accepted, if he gets past me, it's done. so I need to protect a position. It was kind of a last-ditched effort by Gooden to throw the block, and you can see that Minter stays in it. Here's the perspective from on board with the 10. You can see closing across the stripe under the bridge at the bottom. There's the block, and he tried to cut him as much of a break as he could, but at that point, Minter was committed to the corner. There was that second spin that nearly took him out after a lapped car spun directly in front of him. What a set of corners for your new race leader, Tucker Minter.
It looked like, especially with that second look, by the way, that he tried to cut it as hard right as he could, to the point where I think he locked up the tires, and that accelerated things where if you lock the car tires up, it's just going to slide on forward, and it's worse than, per se, not checking up in some cases, because it ricochets and rockets you across the track. But we still have some great battles. Take a look at this. This is the 8th place car, still trying to hold on to the grouping of 2 our competitors behind. He's been in a fight just about every single lap of this race.
Yeah, just can't seem to get away. That's Christopher Beets in the number 15 machine. He's trying to chase down and reel in Ertman Aloe, but right now, not happening for the moment. The difference between those two, 0.7 of a second, and Beets is in a tricky spot because he's trying to track down the car in front of him while also not get chased down by the car behind, so he's in a good spot. Further up the road, the battle for 4th position. It is Eddie Kerner who's got it, but he also got Caden Bin and Braden Werner who want it. And Bin, one of the biggest movers, Justin, we called him out a little bit earlier. In fact, he is the biggest mover in this race, +7 after he started in 12th, but he's not satisfied yet. He wants more.
The Poughkeepsie, New York-based driver having a stellar race. I think if he qualified a little bit better, we might be talking about him in that fight for the race lead, because he's had the raw pace. The lap times have been near identical to your top 2 competitors. Well, prior to what we've seen with Wyatt Gooden and Tucker Minter there, of course, a few laps ago. It's just that he hasn't been able to completely move his way up in his lost time, in fact, in groupings such as this, because Kerner is about 2/10 to a full 10 off one of the drivers he's worked with in the past already up at the front of the field.
And on a shorter track, right, there's less opportunities to gain time, to lose time. So there's margins, to end up some 6.5 seconds off of the battle for the race lead, like these cars that are 4th on the back are, is only, fractions every single time around. But, I mean, these cars race so good, Justin. You can see Bin just parking it on the back of that number 3 up the road. You've got Braden Werner wanting to join the party as well. You talked about how good these cars drive in the sim. You can see how comfortable these drivers are, maybe against drivers that they're not really familiar with, right? We're on that nose camera there on board with a 14 of Bin. A lot of the time you'll be racing with the same guys as usual. You kind of have an understanding of how they race. In this, we talked about the mix of, some of the non-road racer guys, the road pros from the sim, the real-life drivers mixed in here. You have to have a lot of confidence in your car to park it on somebody like that. And let's go with the virtual visor cam. You're seeing basically exactly what the driver of the 14 machine, Caden Bin, is seeing. And it looks like Justin, even in the sim, the rear view camera having some issues. A little technical problem in the virtual car. Going to make sure that they take a look at that.
Yeah, that's not good to lose that. That's essentially your back mirror, because if you look towards the very center of the back bumper, you'll see a little bit of a divot. And that's where essentially an onboard camera is that projects what's behind your back bumper to that respective dash. There's no specific rear view mirror attached to the top of the race car or in your cockpit like you may have with some of our competitors. So it's vital to be able to have that working, but look at that. Bin's not wanting to be patient about this anymore, and some of these other cars are also starting to get really testy here, with Kerner being a full 2/10 a lap to the leaders in some cases.
And you wonder why there's no rear view mirror. That's because the engine's behind you, right? So that's one of the changes that happens. You got the firewall back there where the engine is, so the typical rear view mirror is not going to help you very much. So that's why they have that rear camera, that rear facing camera on the back of the car, so that you know who's going on behind you. You got your side mirrors, but those big fender flares towards the back of the car make it a little bit tricky to see, so that you have that camera as an option just to make things a little bit more accessible. in the sim and in real life, so you can see what's going on and you have that situational awareness. Look at the clock, top left quarter of your screen, nearly 3/4 distance, closing in on the 10-minute left mark in this race. Tucker Minter still the leader, 0.6 of a second up the road of the 37 of Tyler Hervias, and you're watching the battle for 4th on back. Kerner feels like his time may be limited, and there's more fighting through the field right-hand side. For 15th on back, it's about 3-4 cars all stacked up. Jonathan Kearns, you got Chris Mann, Carter Kundinger, and Mike Rasmus, all within 2 seconds of each other back there in traffic.
Yeah, the battle for 15th is one of the bigger groupings of cars scrapping for position, where they're running 49 4s and 49 5s at the moment. Just hasn't worked their way per se, but for Kearns, just looks comfortable right now. The car behind Chris Mann just needs to stop, for one, smacking the turtles with the left side tires. That can lose you some time and potentially damage parts of the suspension if you hit the turtles hard enough. But for two, you just need to focus the task at hand, hit back your marks, and not hit the right side curbing like that once more.
Yeah, because you'll beat up your race car, right? I mean, maybe if you're not familiar with the iRacing service, we've kind of, explained how these cars and tracks get into the sim as they're laser scanned. So you have the data points, that's up to millimeter accuracy. And then, of course, the art team goes in, makes it look like it does in real life. But all that data is from the actual, car or from the actual track. But, damage, we talked about, the cars dealing with different track temperatures, which involves, well, the cars can get damaged. I mean, we've seen some cars with damage. We've highlighted that from some of the drivers who got into, some incidents earlier in this race. You can damage your car, and again, in a race in which you're not planning to pit at all, as that was some contact for 15th position. Moved out of the way was Jonathan Kearns, as it was Chris Mann pushing his way through. So Mann and Kundinger going to get around Kearns. That was the battle for 15th. But Justin, just to finish my point, these cars can get damaged. You can hurt yourself. So driving a clean race as well, just as important as driving a fast one.
Exactly. And the damage could add up. Here's the thing for Chris Mann. He's got significant front nose damage on both sides around the headlight that can slow him down. The reason for that contact, the previous corner, there was a hit of the curb for the teal car. That opened the chance, and what we just talked about. Mann's been hitting those curbing on the right side a lot. That time, it caused that ricochet effect back where it bumped him right into the car alongside him.
And the curve's not necessarily awful, right? I mean, I don't think that these drivers really want to be on that curve. It's, you talk about those kind of sausage curves where it's, I think, a little bit more of a violent hit. You can see it lift to the right side of the car. That curbing right there in turn one, very different, where you can get on it and you're not really going to have that same kind of bounce back effect. But you can get away with it if you're on your own. But when there's a car to the outside and you're trying to go 2x2 through a really tight portion of the racetrack, you can't afford to hit a curb and have that car basically jump or shift 1 or 2 feet to the left. That's how the contact happened. And I think credit as well to Kearns, who did a good job of recovering. Didn't end up off in the grass, wasn't into a barrier or the tires, only dropped those 2 positions, and is in a battle for 17th at the rear of this group of 4. He wants to hold off Mike Rasmus to not lose out to all of these drivers. So Kundinger trying to close it on Mann, Kearns and Rasmus fighting behind, and the battle for the race lead right-hand side of your screen. Tucker Minter, it was as low as 0.6 of a second a handful of laps ago. Right now, the difference is 1 second, basically flat, between he and the 37 who you ride on board with.
And stretching back and forth this gap, but I've noticed that Tyler's been getting some quicker lap times. Minter's starting to fall off a little bit by about 1/10 of a second a lap. He's got the better average lap pace, but look on that bottom left corner. Big hit again to the sausage curbs for Chris Mann. Again loses him another spot.
This time it was to the 0-2. Carter Kundinger was able to get around him, complete that pass, and it was a tricky one because he ended up on the outside of turn 8 and 9, but he was able to make the move. So up a spot goes Mann, then back down a spot and he goes. And Kundiger doing a good job recovering from a damaged car, which happened in an incident earlier this race, to keep on going. Now Jonathan Kern's going to try his best to get back to man. Kearns is at almost seafoam green 040, just behind the car you're looking at bottom left right now in 16th position for Chris Mann. But this group of four feels like they're going to battle all the way to the end. There's also a battle for fourth that we've been showing you. Eddie Kerner has it. Braden Werner wants it. Werner +1, trying to close out this race with another position gained. And then, of course, the right-hand side are now on board with the battle for the race lead. And all those intervals left-hand side of your screen. So as we come to 5 minutes to go, look at 1-2. I mentioned that it was the second the last time by, now down to 9/10. That is a gain a little bit for the 37, Justin, but you can see as it goes back to 9.5, now back down to 9.1. That's good, but you're going to need to get at least a tenth or two per lap if you're going to catch him in time.
Here's the thing, though. Tucker Minter's been making mistakes off and on throughout the past couple laps. He lost 3/10 last time. They equalized it back out, though, because Tower made a mistake going through that quick chicane once more through the uphill. If he makes any more mistakes, it's over. He needs Minter, I think, to make another mistake back here in this section, and just about got it.
Anytime you have that hard braking zone, right, and going through the gears as well, there's an opportunity for somebody to make a mistake. I'm also just looking up the road. Is there any traffic that's going to be a factor? We'll get a good look here. There's one car up the road. That's Nicholas Charist in the 24th spot. Further up the road, Dane Verano, but there's no gaggle of cars, right? We've seen this battle for the race lead when it was a battle between Wyatt Gooden and Tucker Minter close in when they caught up to a group of 5 or 6 lap cars fighting together. There was a couple of, sketchy moments, and it allowed the gap to close in. Relatively speaking, clean track up the road, assuming those lapped cars that these leaders will catch kind of yield, but there's no side-by-side for the moment. So if everybody's paying attention, Tucker Minter should be in a very good position.
I think so, and the thing is, Roberts, especially in the grouping for the battle for P8 you see on your screen here too, will end up trying to go deeper on the brakes. We talk about confidence as a driver. This car is very strong under braking, and if you get your brake biases dialed in right, some competitors can gain a tenth, a corner potentially, if they can set it in properly and not lock up the brakes or miss said corner to be able to close back in time. Some of these cars, we've seen exactly that. Some of the battles for P15 is just about who hits the least amount of curbing along in uphill. It's just been various different ebbs and flows of this race from various parts of the field.
You saw in that last shot a bit of front-end damage on a handful of those cars. Wonder if that was car-to-car contact or, running over some curbs a little bit too much even there. I mean, these cars are getting dirty as this race goes on. That's the 37 machine. Still second, still trying to chase down Minter. The gap down to 0.5 of a second. There was a lot of smoke in turn number 1. Looks like track is clear as these race leaders will catch up to it, Justin, but he is doing it. The clock now down to nearly 2 minutes left, and he's making his case. He's cut it in half, and you get that second bit.
Almost wonder he was trying to cool down the tires a little bit once he got to about 0.8 of a second, because this is what I was trying to mention with the later braking. He's been going about a full 10 feet deeper under braking for the past couple laps. There it is again, another 10th, just like that.
And it is a heavy braking zone, so trying to close it in, but he drops it off now. 0.6 of a second, the advantage goes to Minter. And when the clock strikes 0, depending on where we are on track, may have an extra lap on top. That may be the last one. Here's every perspective you could want, looking off of the race leader, looking up to the race leader, and from the outside shots, battle for the lead in the closing laps.
And if I'm Tyler Herbias, I'm looking just around Tucker Minter's race car and seeing all that traffic and thinking, that may be my chance to be able to close up enough time. If Minter gets held up by any of those cars, there is a decent shot of him winning this race. It's not going to be a lot of time, though. About a minute on the clock. They might get one more lap. That's about it.
Watch the clock, left-hand side. We'll keep an eye and we'll let you know when the white is out to make this official. There is traffic ahead of Minter. He needs to find a way to get around Nicholas Charis. He's going to pull out of the way. as we may take the white flag in this race. Minter, advantage 0.6 of a second. I think if Hervias Justin had about a dozen more, he had a good shot, but he's really going to need something here.
It's all going to come down, I think, to the one car in front of Jack Sanchez. If they reach him in uphill, that may be enough for an attempt to try and go up in West Bend. If Minter's let on go quickly, race is over.
More cars up the road. Do they yield to the duo of leaders? It's Sanchez. As you mentioned, he's the one who had a scare in turn one. That's where the damage comes from on the front of that red, white, and blue Corvette up the road. How does the clock wind down? 3 seconds, 2 and 1. Final lap of the race. And now a checkered flag for Tucker Minter, winner of the Corvette C8.R Championship Series. And across the line, the battle for 8th, Ertman Aloe trying to hang on. One final right-hand corner. The 15 of Christopher Beets can't get there. What a final lap.
What a crazy race. And remember, there's those intense battles still going on. It's been a quiet one for Michael Diaz and Ryan Hill. They've been tucked together much of this race, kept it clean to the very end. But that battle for 16th has been intense all day.
What a race. I mean, all 40 minutes of non-stop action. Some of the cars show the battle scars to prove it. And for Tyler Hervias, what a chance late in this race to get the Tucker Minter. Minter, who ran second for most of it until he was able to catch, bump, and pass the number 1 of Wyatt Gooden to go on to get the race win. And he will walk away as your champion and get that incredible custom Corvette C8.R watch. Let's take a look at your iRacing full race results. The Minter wins it in final margin of victory, about half a second. You can see the differences. Gooden kind of on his own. Eddie Kerner winning out in that battle with Braden Werner. A couple of battles through on the field. We saw Lowy hold off Beets across the line with Tom Abramitis, the top 10.
Hunter Manley, quiet race, +5 for him. As well, Carter Cundinger, a part of that crazy battle with Chris Mann, Jonathan Kearns and company. They finished 15th through 17th, respectively. Some rough goings, though, for the drivers about 18th on back. Mike Rasmus, down was in Verano. Among your last drivers on the lead lap today.
And only Philip Campbell and Shane Kaiko, the drivers who don't make it the distance in this 40-lap sprint race. So what an afternoon we promised of racing here at Lime Rock Park, and we had it, Justin. We had a lot of fast cars, great battling throughout the field, but close calls with some wrecks and some drama, of course, in the contact in the pass for the race win. An awesome event for these drivers who you mentioned through the time attacks over the last couple of weeks to qualify into this event, and they certainly put on a great show.
They did indeed, and we've seen the best of the best battle across this racetrack. And it was expected to be competitive. We've seen exactly that with the battle for the race lead. It wasn't going to be easy to take said lead. You had to be the aggressor. You had at the same time hit your spot to be the aggressor. In turn, Tucker Minter, while yes, there was that bit of contact, is the one who takes the checker flag. He gets to be happy, but on the bright side for Wyatt Gooden, he still finishes on the podium.
And those podium drivers, those that walk away with the hardware. It is the watch to your race winner, Tucker Minter. Second and third are going to walk away with a custom Corvette Racing helmet. So for all the drivers who joined in on this one, thanks for being a part of it. If you're watching us on Twitch, we will hand you off to coverage of the iRacing Rallycross All-Star Invitational and World Championship presented by Yokohama. For the entire team at iRacing and Chevrolet, for Justin Prince and myself, Evan Pasoko, thanks for tuning in. And congratulations to Tucker Minter, the 2020 Corvette C8.R Championship Series champion.